As a colleague, at this time I introduce to you Ms. Bridget McKinney.
Have you ever met an angel? Because I believe I did. When I came to Carroll City Senior High School over 17 years ago, the first person that greeted me was Coach Moore. His words were, "You were number 33 at American Senior High School on the varsity basketball team, wasn't you?" And I never was coached by him, but I played against his state championship team. His players that made it to the state championship, they didn't win that year, but I'll never forget it. I played against his team and he remembered me and I didn't know who he was. But I knew then I had met an angel. He began to tell me a history of my brothers and my sisters and all their athletic accomplishments, and I thought, how does he know that stuff? But as the years continued on, I had no idea how important his role would be and how he played in my life. He followed me as I had my first child, Ivory, and then my second child, Rose, and up until this very moment of Jewel. And I remember going by his house when Paul was too ill to come to work. And it took about 45 minutes, I think we sat in the car, Abram and I, waiting to get in this house to see Paul. Paul did not want me to see him. And that was quite strange because, as Mr. I indicated, he was translucent, but for whatever reason, the way he wanted me to remember him was in his strong state. And all I wanted to do was just share those words, because anyone that knows Paul, and you got those emails from Paul, and I always would say to Paul, oh, you see the world, to the governor, to the senator, to the president. I always said, is the CIA going to show up at my doorstep as well? And he says, not to worry. And one of my wishes was that Paul would retire and write for the Miami Herald, because he was such a powerful writer. And as time passed on before this passing, when they speak of the word legend, it was truly a legend, because everything that he did not look for praise. He did not want you to glorify him. He was just Paul. I would call him Coach or Coach Moore, but he wanted you to just call him Paul, like he was just an everyday fellow. And that's what he became. And having been in my life so long, I looked to him somewhat as a father figure, as I transitioned from a teacher to activities director to an assistant principal. And I would go by his classroom to observe him, and the teaching was different. It was one that was of a lesson for a lifetime. And I know it was meaningful to the students because everything he would talk about were about the current issues that affected them every day. And when he would write and encapsulate every single tragedy that one of our students who passed from Carroll City over the years. And he would not only write, he would go by each of those homes and sit with those families. Something that no one ever really knew. He would continue to make those phone calls of encouragement to tell those parents that it gets better, especially after he lost his son. He was also like a secret Santa. I'll never forget one Christmas, he went around and dropped off an envelope to every security monitor. And inside was a $100 bill. He did it silently, but it sent a powerful message of the kind of person or the angel that I knew. So when I asked you, have you ever met an angel? I believe I did. That was Paul. Thank you.
also introduce to you Mr. Peter Adler.
Hello, everybody. Paul and I went back to the 1980s. We both started here roughly the same time. I started in 1986. Paul 10 years before that. But I really didn't get to know him. Didn't get to know him well until about 6-7 years ago, when Eric Hafter, Paul, and myself were team teaching in the old auditorium in the Oval. And that's when I really got to observe Paul in action, interact with the students. And we became pretty good friends. And we spent many hours eating lunch together, or meeting at Starbucks and discussing the fate of the world in other ways. And we both sort of shared a gloomy attitude, but we did it with humor, so we laughed as we wept in our coffee. But anyway, I do want to mention a few things that I think are important. I remember back in 2006, after one of a number of unfortunate deaths of Cal City students under tragic circumstances, Paul started something called the Accountability Project. And I actually still have the clipboard with hundreds of signatures that he got people to sign. And it was a very simple idea. He felt that if the then governor, Jeb Bush, was holding Florida students accountable by making them pass a certain standardized test, that Governor Bush and other political leaders should be held accountable for the safety and well-being of young people. And I was very, very impressed with the way he went about doing that. He was very earnest in that attempt. And of course, that's just in line with what we've heard about. I don't know if people know that before he came to Cal City, he worked for the United Farm Workers, which was a union that was fighting for some of the most exploited workers in the United States, the people who pick our crops and put food in our table. He spent many years doing that. As I said, or as we've heard, Paul was very, very interested and concerned and wanted to make people aware of what we're facing in the United States today. I guess he was sort of frustrated that he really couldn't get across the serious situation we're facing. And he did his best. He did a lot of writings we've heard. He would often post things under the name of Malcolm Martin. Two of his heroes, of course, one who became Malcolm X. And he would post those writings. I'm going to try and somehow get a compilation of those worth reading. I do want to mention something else. Of course, Paul was very concerned about the attacks that public education is facing in the United States today. And of course, he totally rejected and condemned No Child Left Behind or a Race to the Top. He saw those for what they were, how destructive they were and are. And he also felt they were particularly bad because they divided teacher against teacher, administrator against administrator, to the point where a couple of years ago, when Carroll City did go from an F to a D, and teachers and others in the school were given a certain amount of money he rejected the money because he felt, and rightly so, that it was being used to divide us. And sure enough, it did. Teachers were squabbling over how much to get. Certain teachers felt they should get more than others. So he saw what that was all about. And he didn't have a blueprint for how to necessarily confront the problems that face us, but he did know that if we are divided, there's no way that we ever get anywhere. So he practiced and believed in solidarity. And that was, I guess, the guiding principle of how he treated people, was to show compassion, to express solidarity with people, and he didn't just talk the talk and walk the walk. In closing, I know that in the last few months, of course, he was very, very ill. But I understand that he was still keeping up with current events. So I'd like to think that during the last few months, that he took some satisfaction from witnessing the Occupy Wall Street movements, which of course has become such an inspirational force in the world. And even though those encampments have gotten convicted by the police, they'll be back in the springtime, probably bigger and stronger than ever. And so when I think of them, I think of the spirit of Paul, and I take some solace